really enabling effectively a new way, not just to do this inter-agent interactions, but really just replace effectively Google.
Yeah.
Because like Google right now is this marketplace of intents. Like you go to Google, you enter your intent, it effectively auctions off your intent to solvers, to advertisers. But then you still need to manually go and do like the thing that you actually
whatever
want to
task
do.
you want to get done.
Yeah. Versus if we change the mindset, it's like, hey, your AI assistant will issue intent, find the best provider, and then execute it.
Hey everyone, this is Ash from Axel, and we have a special guest over here, Illia from Near, obviously, needs no introduction. And this is a episode of the Talking Intentionally podcast, where we try to talk all things agents and intents. So I guess just to get things started, I thought what better thing to do than get Illia's take on how do you define intents? When did you get into this sort of stuff to begin with? And yeah, we can just start with that.
For sure, yeah. Well, I define intent actually as effectively a request from any party that that needs negotiation, that needs some form of interaction with and agreement with other parties, and then gets settled. That commitment gets settled. So, but to simplify, it's effectively you don't actually know how you want this thing executed. You just specify what you want, right? And then somebody figures out how to execute this, and then you commit to that on chain. And so it's a very generic thing. It's kind of hard to explain to people. And so it's easier to explain with use cases. The challenge I found, everybody in crypto just explains swaps.
Yeah.
And so I like to explain it in different examples. So for example, I'm planning a trip to Bangkok. I need hotel. I need car from the airport. That's an intent. Hey, I plan me a trip to Bangkok, right? I'm here 7 days. I want to stay in a hotel near the venue, right? So that's intent that goes out, and then you have like, oh, I'm Expedia.com, I'll get you a flight. I'm Hotels.com, I'll give you a hotel. I'm Grab, I'll give you a taxi.
Yeah.
And effectively it gets all assembled, and then I pay whatever how much it costs, and that gets settled, right? So this is an example of non-swap intent that is very natural for anyone, right? And requires a pretty multi-pass execution, some negotiation potentially, maybe like refining as well what user actually wants, right? Because like, hey, do you want a hotel like this or like this, right? So there may be like multi-step negotiation, and I think that's why it's actually bigger than crypto, and it's actually where AI comes in, because some of these things can be negotiated between AIs, some of this can come to user, some of it requires like additional, for example, attestations that, hey, actually when you buy a flight, you need to sign terms of service, right? That's just like legal requirement, and which in blockchain doesn't exist. And so you need to propagate that to the user, get that signature. So there's a lot of the small things that needs to be like really packaged. And so that's why we've kind of introduced intents as more of a generic framework for AI agent coordination, as well as swaps as kind of a more primitive use case to showcase.
And what, I guess you had a tweet that got me excited in the first place that kind of summarized a lot of this. It's like, let's go beyond swaps for the example. Let's talk about like shit that's actually like real world, regular people with constraints. But like second part of this question is like, when did you first even hear the term intents? And I guess like what even kind of got you first excited? Because for me, it's like I think the Anoma guys talked about this quite a bit.
So I'm an angel investor in Anoma, and I know Adrian even from before that. So yeah, I've been talking with them for a long time. So yeah, I've been hearing about intents from them for a while, and I think as I was kind of thinking more about AI agents and also as we were starting working on chain abstraction, that was kind of two sides where like it started to click together, because hey, if you think of chain abstraction, right, like even kind of what with chain signatures what we rolled out, it effectively allows you to like unify your account across all chains. But when you're actually trying to do, you still need to figure out like things, and you need to marshal data and you marshal assets. And so that seems like a very, I don't really want to specify that. Yeah. There needs to be a way to like under-specify, like I want something to happen here, and then somebody else should figure out the complexity. And so that fits really well with kind of this intent solver framework. And similarly with AI agents, right? Like we're talking with a lot of AI companies, they're like, hey, we want to transact effectively with another company, but normally like two effectively salespeople need to first meet, sign a contract, then there's billing process, invoicing process. It's like it's so complicated, and like right now, the AI space, not blockchain, but like true AI space, needs to go through all of that if you want to connect to.
Pain in the ass, yeah.
So that's where like all of these things I think is coming together and really enabling effectively a new way, not just to do this inter-agent interactions, but really just replace effectively Google.
Yeah.
Because like Google right now is this marketplace of intents. Like you go to Google, you enter your intent, it effectively auctions off your intent to solvers, to advertisers. But then you still need to manually go and do like the thing that you actually
whatever
want to
task
do.
you want to get done.
Yeah. Versus if we change the mindset, it's like, hey, your AI assistant will issue intent, find the best provider, and then execute it, right? And so it just shows you the summary of what you want to do. Like that's completely new interface, new internet, and that's actually what I'm trying to build. So
yeah, that's a super cool analogy. I don't think I've heard. It makes perfect sense. Like Google is like this. Like
Google is your intent machine. Yeah. So this is intent matching machine. There's also interesting other side, which is Instagram and TikTok. Yeah. They actually intent discovery machines. Yeah. So they actually, instead of like, oh, I have this intent, it's more like, you should really think about this intent. Like, hey, here is a hotel that you would really like, or here is a whatever paint or something get advertised, right? So there's both sides. Like, hey, I have intent, as well as like how to discover intents. Yeah. And actually, one of the problems in crypto in general, this is something I talked with Zaki, is this intent discovery, because right now intent discovery is Twitter. It's like people shilling each other on Twitter about different things. So we can actually have a way more effective model with predictive AI to effectively, hey, this is the things you should be looking at, and then you can decide if you want to execute on.
Yeah, 100%. I think LLMs is like helping with intent discovery, especially as you have more data and more things that you can look at. But I kind of wanted to focus this conversation on two things, because I feel like people talk a lot about like agent payments, which is like a pretty big thing right now. People talk a lot about like intents for swaps, as you pointed out. In my head, like agent verification. So like literally, as you know, this whole thing falls apart if you can't verify that an agent or a solver has done this correctly. They can accept the intent and they can just run, kind of. And then topic number 2 is just use cases, which we can talk about all day. But just to start on the verification side, in my head, you have a couple things out there. So with Across, you have optimistic verification of what agents do. So just UMA oracles that secure what the task might be done. You have cool ZK coprocessor companies, and you have like other companies that are doing like literal declarative blockchains, like the Anomas and Essentials of the world. What's your kind of take on like what verification should look like? And actually, I think you and I had some Twitter like engagement a little bit ago about like formal verification being the end game. But
yeah. So I believe formal verification will be an end game, and then there's like few steps in between that. So starting with formal verification, I mean, effectively, the only way to secure anything is math.
Yeah.
Right. And so I mean, ZK is part of this, but effectively having a formal proof and formal set of constraints that you want to apply on a different AI agent on a counterparty is a way to actually ensure that it doesn't matter what that counterparty thinks, right? But what they execute is constrained by what you have provided, right? So to give you an example, actually with the smart contracts, right? Right now you go to a smart contract, you send a transaction, and you hope that smart contract is doing the right thing, right? You hope they did the audits, you hope maybe they did them in formal verification, but you don't know.
Yeah.
And your transaction itself doesn't contain any constraints. But what I want to send a transaction with constraints. I want to say, hey, I'm sending this money to a lending protocol. I don't want it to lose my money unless, I'm under collateralized, right? Well, now if there is a hack in the protocol, right, that means they're in their form of proof, they are missing some of the constraints. And so your transaction literally will not compute over because the formal kind of verifier will verify the constraints are not met. So your transaction will literally get rejected on the chain side. And so that's how we can bring formal verification effectively on the blockchain level. But you can do the same thing for off-chain actors, for agents, and actually verify that any interaction you do, if there's a intent style kind of commitment protocol, that like, hey, my intent is, I want to swap this for this, or I want to execute this transaction, and it cannot escape these conditions, right? And so the only matching thing needs to kind of match that constraints. So that's a kind of very powerful tool set. The problem is formal verification is really hard for people, and so we need AIs to actually do formal verification.
Ooh, okay, interesting. Yeah, so I guess
this is something. Yeah, we're going to be launching a competition around that to progress. Now, there's another piece which is interesting and kind of gives you a little bit different properties, but it's useful right now, which is TEs, where you can run agents inside them. You get privacy, and you can get some level of verification that actually this code was executed over your data, not some random other code, right, and was stealing your money. So not solving everything, but that gives you a part. And then third part is having a dispute resolution systems inside intent itself. So when I'm setting intent, if it's, moving crypto, well, it's a cryptographic kind of proof, right? But if it's, I'm buying tickets or I'm, getting a car, well, the dispute resolution there may be, some insurance. And now if I'm buying, I don't know, a house and I didn't actually get the house in possession, we'll go to court.
Yeah.
Right? So dispute resolution has actually physical court in that country.
Yeah.
So you can have like different levels of dispute resolution on the intent itself. So here's like three things. Form verification, the final frontier. TEs as a way to get like privacy and verification that the code is correct.
Yeah.
And dispute resolution as a way to actually interact with real world where things actually go, bad and there's like bad actors, but you can have actual court and, legal system and actual physical things and insurance to mitigate that.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really good point. Like it could be, maybe I want the least strong form of verification imaginable where it's just like, if Ash says that this is true, like I'm happy with it.
Yeah, it can be reputation where you say like, hey, if we're doing something where you're getting me a coffee, effectively, and it's like, if you didn't bring me a coffee, well, shit, you get ding on the reputation, and like anybody else who is going to be transacting with you will not see that, right? But we'll see that, but that's a repercussion. But if I'm buying like an expensive house, like I want to know that actually transaction completes.
Yeah.
So that's where it really depends on the interaction.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So I think verification is very interesting, and there's a lot. Like if we transition now towards kind of use cases as a result of verification. Like what to you stands out, and you touched on a couple of them. Like when we talk about these real world examples, like I guess the question is like immediately going beyond swaps and bridging with a cross or Uniswap X and those styles of protocols. Like what are you seeing that's intriguing, that's usable today? And then end game, like what, I know you mentioned you have like a list of just cool ideas that could be exciting, but.
Well, I think first of all, e-commerce is possible today, right? I had a demo of like buying a t-shirt. And so you can have agents effectively executing e-commerce transactions, and you can have like e-commerce shops becoming agents and like transacting with others. So that's a pretty easy, straightforward, like it's a different type of swap. Now, when you have like a more complex planning, and kind of interaction, that again, travel is like a good example. But you can imagine like any kind of, I plan a construction and I want to find an architect and a building crew and materials. Like somebody knows how to do that, right? I don't. I just have an idea and I want to interact with someone, and then I will invest a bunch of money, and then they should build it. And if they don't build it, I'll sue them, right? Like that is an intent, effectively. Yeah. Like how do you do this? Now, a little bit more, maybe closer to home, right? Is like, hey, I want to find a service. I need a plumber. I need to, get tax accountant, etc. This, for physical things, you need a person to come and do stuff. For digital things, this can be a fully AI agent that actually does your tax accounting, executes in TE, you cross-reference it with other AI agents or with a human accountant to verify the results, and like all of that is packaged in intent. I want to file my taxes, right? In US specifically, that's a pretty nightmare situation. So you can have all of this like different things. Effectively, anything you would go to Google to like, I need to do this. Yeah. Like you can actually imagine an AI agent or AI agent and like physical actual services to actually execute, right? Order pizza, organize a party, like all of this use cases effectively.
Literally anything. I think this is the part where it's like I get a little jaded when I keep seeing like new swaps or new bridging or new whatever.
I mean, again,
it can be anything.
Just think as Google. Like what you're putting in Google and you're seeing a bunch of ads, those are useful things. We're actually going to post a request for agents effectively with a ton of stuff that we think people should build. Because, and it's effectively based on like what are the Google like searches that people do.
Oh, that's crazy. That's awesome. I guess the double-edged sword here, or in my head, this is the biggest challenge. To your point, anything that you have, if there's a task that somebody can do, whether it's just me and it's a very illiquid market, or whether it's like swapping, where it's like super liquid, like you need a lot of agents or you need a lot of solvers for these in order to get like good rates or good, like with Uniswap X, it's like better for most swaps compared to like using an AMM for certain ranges of prices because you have these super liquid solver markets. And you're at like, how do we make these liquid? How do we get a lot of agents and a lot of solvers? Do we even need that? Is that necessary? Especially when we talk about more like real world kind of use cases.
So it's a combination of things. One is, I mean, as we're getting more users, they have more demand, there will be more solvers. So it's like a flywheel, and like I'm excited. Like we introduced the AI Assistant Alpha, and then we're going to be plugging it in effectively any front end that wants AI. That's like you just integrate it. It's an API, right? Now on the other side, there is a backstop, and backstop is effectively a web agent that goes and clicks on the website and does things for you. So you can always effectively mimic a person doing something through the website
super
and
interesting.
effectively like hide that as an agent that does something that you said, right? Now, like, they're a little bit slow right now. There's like a little bit, but like this stuff all improving. So like we're effectively like gonna abstract any existing application or website through that. And then if people want to actually capture more, like if those services want to capture more of their own kind of revenue that's going through the system, they can integrate effectively a simple API and turn themselves into a solver and agent, right?
This is incredibly exciting because, like, I think not to go too hard on the swaps example, but like with Uniswap X, like the backstop is V3, or like the backstop is like here's the traditional way that I could do the swap. So what you're saying is like you literally have the backstop being like an AI model that's trained on how a human would do the task, like order a coffee through Uber Eats this way,
exactly.
Or like whatever else.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this is actually back in 2017 before Near AI even. We were doing this.
Oh, crazy!
We were like actually clicking on, like we had a mirrored phone for users, and we would click in the cloud on behalf of the user in the apps. We didn't have LLMs back then. It was like smaller models, but this is like this is a universal backstop effectively to do things.
Crazy exciting. Another thing on the use case topic, I think is like, especially given the AI focus here, like one way that I think about like intents as being useful for regular AI people is like these are black boxes beyond black boxes. Like especially as you have like bigger LLMs, like we want to harness the power of the black box, but we want certain guardrails. How do you view that as coming into play when we think about like a world where we have personal agents, we have like big models that do everything for people, but intents maybe, or specifically like constraint checking, can be super useful for that.
Exactly. I think constraint checking, I mean, effectively formal proofs and formal constraints will be the methodology to do that, because it does, again, as I said, like it doesn't matter what the person thinks, the question how they act, right? So like it doesn't matter what LLM thinks through, if at the end it acts how I want it, right? And I may have underspecified, so this is where actually the complexity will come, how to give users the right tools to specify their intents properly, right? And this is why I think AI Assistant will be your interface to do that, right? You will not be doing it directly. It will like interpret like, oh, I want a pizza. It's like, okay, you want a pizza, you're in Lisbon, you like Hawaiian pizza, so let's like prioritize that. So it's like it will add all the constraints that it knows from the memory, and actually like, and I know that like you don't care, you're not going to go to court if they don't deliver pizza, so like let's set up dispute resolution as like, return me money.
Got it.
And right? So it constructs that intent and like shoots it out, and so that's, I think, again, that's why I think AI will be the interface for the blockchain and for the rest of the world, because like it can do it way more effectively. It can like scan through millions of options. It can find, all the relevant information, and it can remember everything about you. And so it's just a more effective way to do that.
Yeah, like it brings up an interesting point. It's like if my intent is like make Ash happy, it's like, okay, like very obscure.
Well, it
exactly
will suggest something. Like if you type this in right now into AI Assistant, it will suggest some ideas, right?
And then eventually,
now it may ask you like, hey, what makes you happy, and you will add it. It will add it into memory, and now next time it will actually try to do that.
Based
right?
off of that,
So. Now, cool. I mean, obviously, all of this is like still research and development, but like we have, effectively we have alpha versions of all of this now, and now we'll see how this is actually evolving. And the idea is to get it in front of everyone in the world, right? So, like,
I will say like one limit that I've like personally been thinking about a little bit is like you're constrained to tasks that are verifiable, correct? Because like if a task isn't verifiable, how do you sort of have an agent go and do this for you? Or
well,
if the outcome constraints
dispute resolution.
Okay, so I guess verifiability through dispute resolution is like.
I mean, effectively, we have a way, like, a court is a final arbiter, and like that's a verification, right? So anything that's not, like, cryptographically verifiable is, community verifiable, is a court verifiable, right? So, I mean, that's what, like, UMA is a good example of that idea, but, like, expand that and add, like, traditional systems into it. Now you have this, like, generic framework of dispute resolution.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, like, the piece we want to add, like, to the intent and effectively enable like a way wider range of things.
Yeah, like changing what type of mechanism. That makes sense. Cool. I mean, I think we covered most of what I was excited about or wanted to cover with you.
Sure, yeah.
What's like, all right, so obviously like Near had the big announcement yesterday. I think it's like near.org/intents with like, this is super exciting and we want to move forward with this. Like for you, when you think, we talked a lot about like long-term, this is applicable to everything. Like today, like what is something that's cool, or maybe in a month, what's something that's cool that you want people to
today right now, you can effectively non-custodial trade Bitcoin for ARB, right? Or Bitcoin for Near, or Bitcoin for, USDT, USDC, right? And it's the solvers are effectively routing liquidity through Binance or Bybit, whatever is available, right? So you actually had non-custodial liquidity of Binance effectively for a lot of pairs that already supported, and like they'll support more and more pairs, right? So yes, there's a lot of cool use cases, but swaps actually work right now,
today,
right?
Yeah.
And but I think like the exciting part is like, we also launched the Near AI, the chat on Near AI was the assistant, is like seeing more and more of those effectively agents plugging into that. And so like for anyone who's building right now, that's a great platform to actually start building this agent and expand effectively functionality of this AI assistant. And then on our side, we're going to be like, again, plugging in this AI assistant in every consumer app we can find, which, Near has like 30 million monthly active users. So we can get this in front of them and start actually getting a lot of intents from the users who actually want things.
That are already using it,
Yeah. Like not the crypto things, but actual real world things. And so that's the flywheel, right? So flywheel is like users will ask intents. We're going to be like, with the design of privacy, we actually extract the intent, and so only save like aggregates of intents. So like people wanted, doctor like a million times, right? And so then we can actually have bounties for the agents that do specific things based on the intents people want.
Yeah, that's super clever. Because like Bootstrap, to your point, like bounties for those specific agents is like today maybe there's nothing, but you see that everyone wants this one thing, so you should have more agents for that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool.
All right. Well, great. Yeah.
Great meeting you.
Nice to meet you. Yeah. Thank you.